Welcome to the PitchVision Academy Cricket Show. It's cricket from now until the end of the show, as it always is. Maybe a couple of little sidelines along the way. But we're mostly going to be talking about improving your game or improving the games of others. My name's David Hinchliffe. I look after things, and helping me to help you are two very fine cricket coaches. The first is the Director of Cricket at Millfield School. It's Mark Garaway. Hello, Garrows. How's it going?
Yeah, good. Thank you very much. It's a bit of a blustery old day here, but I'm enjoying the fact that there's some sun, hopefully, down under, and there's going to be some good cricket played over the next few weeks.
Yeah, well, you know, it's the big one, isn't it? The big show coming up. Yeah. Secondly, it's the head of cricket performance at Portsmouth Grammar School. It's Sam Lavery. Hello, Lavers. Also got an eye on the Ashes.
Yeah, I think that the build-up's has been such that everyone's very excited about the cricket now, aren't they? And Ashes all around the world seems to be the focus, and I guess with social media being kind of advancing every single year. The last time we were out there for the Ashes, obviously 4 years ago now, and social media's got to such a stage now that there are so many different avenues that you're being bombarded with Ashes information that everyone just wants to get on with it, I think.
Yeah, I think so. It always happens, though, around any big thing. It's like, everybody always says by the end, they're all saying, we've had enough of the talk, let's have the action. So, why not this one? You know, when there's even more talk than there's ever been, you know, there's even more scope to say, let's stop talking and start playing cricket.
If you think back to when was the last time that we won it prior to 2005? What was that,
86,
87. And how would have the build-up been conducted? It would have been, I guess, newspapers, a bit of radio, and a bit of TV, and that would have been it, wouldn't it? And now, if you think about the different avenues it's coming, I think you've probably got like 15 different apps on your phone that are all telling you pretty much the same thing, that it hasn't started yet.
Under the bed covers with your shortwave radio, Gareth?
Yeah, it's very, very different. It was exactly that, wasn't it? And then occasionally BBC Two would have highlights of it. And I remember with this Brisbane Test match that's is going on at the moment in mind, I remember in 86, 87, Big Merv Hughes trying to bounce out the batting helmetless Ian Botham, who kept flapping him for six. And that was the last 100 that Beefy scored for England. Right. But what an amazing innings it was, and I think that John Embry and Graham Dilley, who's sadly no longer with us, bowled us to victory in that. So it would be lovely to think that England could do the same again. But look at the record that Australia have had since those days, since 1986-87 at the Gabbatoir, as I call it, and having been there myself in a support sort of context, it's an incredibly intimidating place, and England are going to have to be absolutely at the top of their game. The key players that we know all about, you know, your Cooks and your Roots and your Andersons and your Broads, and probably your Bairstows and your Allies, now looking at, you know, what they've got in there, are going to have to be on their mettle, because it's tough. However, there's some conjecture about the Australian side at the moment in terms of their selection, isn't there? And although everybody's getting excited about Tim Payne being selected to keep wicket, my personal experience of Tim Payne, and I know this isn't borne out by stats or performance recently, but that bloke is hell of a cricketer, and it could be that they've picked him at the right stage of his career with the right stimulus, which is the biggest Test series in the world around him, and he may well come off, because he can do some pretty special things, and it's been a surprise to me that he hasn't confirmed his talent and played a hell of a lot more. So it's going to be fascinating, mate, and I can't wait. I really can't wait. I probably will listen to the first bit of it, go to sleep, wake up, watch some highlights, but I'll definitely be connected with it.
Well, hype or otherwise, we're going to talk a little bit more about something a bit close to home for perhaps the people listening, a couple of people who are coaching, people who are playing, and that's to do with an article that was written a little while ago by Stuart Armstrong, who is one of the big cheeses at UK coaching, and he's also a coach as well. He coaches hockey, he coaches cricket. I know because I saw him present at the ECB conference, and he wrote an article called "Drills Are the Drugs of Coaching," and in it he argues very eloquently that unopposed drills, those drills where there is no opponent, if you like, if you're a batsman, there's no bowler or so on and so forth. They feel good, but they're not very useful, which is why he compares them to drugs. And I wanted to know what you guys thought about that idea that there is something that exists in the game which everybody does all the time, and it feels useful, and it builds confidence, and it gives you. It feels like it gives you something, but actually, when you look at it, it doesn't give you as much as you think. So, what's your views on that article and the sort of theories and ideas within it?
What I love about the article is the fact that he's written it from experience, isn't he? And he's written it from both sides of the argument around drills. Really, he came from a position we probably all have as coaches, particularly at the start of our coaching career, where all we want is a toolbox of drills that we can work with people. I mean, even on here, we get asked all the time, "What's a drill? What's a drill? Give us a drill," don't we? And because people find them really convenient, and as you say, that they associate this feeling when they've done the drill of confidence, and yet he's come through that and looked at it through a different lens, I suppose, and come from the other stage of it, which is, are they actually doing anything useful at all? Because ultimately, when you get into a contest against somebody, you're a problem solver, aren't you? And often those drills are so constrained that they don't allow you to solve problems within it. So I would say I'm more on where he is now than the other side of it, but I've come through a very similar journey, and I don't think anybody who's coached long enough wouldn't have come through a similar journey. And I think the most experienced coaches now, they use a drill or they go to a drill because what they see in front of them and what they've observed in front of them demands it, rather than go into a drill just because that's what you do. And that's certainly the way that I used to coach, and way back. But hopefully my practice now doesn't look quite so formulaic as that, and it's more based on what I see in front. And if there is a drill that can take somebody to a different level and then us pull them back out of that and put them into a more open environment to see whether that drill has had a positive impact or not, then that's the way that I tend to go about things nowadays.
Yeah, it's quite a controversial phrase, isn't it, to use, the drugs, and I suppose that's, that was the kind of the point, wasn't it, Lavers, to say, we're all addicted to something here and it makes us feel good, but actually let's look at it from another angle. So, ignoring that kind of language, what do you think about the idea that maybe spending less time on drills and more time on other things could be useful, and what are those other things?
Well, I think that that opportunity for open play and a chance to have multiple opportunities or multiple different things happen and make decisions in a kind of more open environment is certainly something that we're seeing as being maybe more important, or maybe has more impact than just sticking to one thing. I think there's still going to be a bit of a place for it, but the way Gareth's kind of suggested is that they should be something that run alongside a main event, if you want, to try and add a little bit here and there, or to try and reinforce, or actually to try and help learn. There's a couple of things in the article that I wouldn't necessarily agree with, because I think somewhere it says they don't help us learn. Well, actually, they're actually a really good way for someone to understand something because they're doing something over again. So it gives them a better understanding of something that they may do automatically in a more open environment. So for some, they would help you learn a little bit, not necessarily in a physical manner, but give you a better understanding of getting to grips with the movements that are taking place or the things you're trying to do. So it might just help your brain just kind of deconstruct the things that are going on. But they're definitely something that need to run alongside or be in your back pocket as a coach, rather than things that are you turn up and you do an hour and a half of drills and you go home again, and that's what I think people are trying to get away from, and I think that's what's seemingly a more successful way to do it. Again, try to avoid people who say always do this or never do that, because that's something that I think's probably not the most constructive, and they're often uses for certain things, even if they're very rarely. So I wouldn't outlaw certain things completely, but having that understanding that certain things just don't need the time commitment that maybe they've been given in the past, and other things that maybe seem to be less controlled are actually less controlled for a reason, that they pass the control over to the player, who then has to make decisions and take control of a situation that they're maybe not comfortable or familiar with, which is cricket.
And this is something which I've been sort of thinking about for a while, is the difference in that use of drills between bowlers and batsmen. And I feel like a lot of the discussion around this area focuses on batsmen. It's saying, don't do drills with batsmen, right? Get rid of the tees, get rid of the drop fees, get someone replicating some kind of bowling, because that's what you need to do to get the timing of the swing and all that. Often it's spoken about like that, but rarely is it spoken about in terms of bowling. And yet, I think bowling has got probably more drills, especially when you've got guys like Steph Jones around. Bowling's probably got more drills than batting has. So is there something there that, because the skills are different, you have to receive when you're batting, you have to receive a delivery from an opponent, whereas bowling, you have to send that to an opponent. So perhaps there's a bit more scope for drills in bowling than there is in batting, perhaps.
Well, I'd agree with that in terms of a bowling action is more of a closed skill. It's not entirely closed, but it's more of a closed skill than batting, which, you're having to react to a stimulus, the incoming stimulus, and a number of other things. I mean, it's not to say that bowlers don't make decisions, because they're making decisions all of the time. I was watching the masterclass with Dan Vittori yesterday, who was talking about him getting into a repeatable bowling action, but all of the time he's making decisions, even in his gather and just before release, based on what the batter's doing at the other end. So, that we do have that, don't we, as a bowler? You do have to be able to look at what the batter's doing at the other end and be able to react. And more so now with 2020 and different shots coming into play than just spin bowlers have always done, in terms of people coming down the pitch or whatever the case may be. People are doing more things against seamers now. So I do get that. But ultimately, the shape of what a bowler does, ball in, ball out, is more consistent than the shape of what a batter does, purely because they get the opportunity to put the ball into play, and the batter largely has to react to that stimulus. So, I think there could be, there are more bowling drills, and certainly when I coach in my environment and look around, there are more, I suppose, regimented bowling drills than the batting ones that I utilise. But I think, as you quite rightly say, mate, I think there's a reason for that.
And if you want to look at kind of that sort of, I saw a tweet from Steph Jones, who I follow very closely because he always produces so much amazing stuff, which was about Brett Lee, saying how his action is almost perfect, and he's a great example of a fast bowler. And that's true, but also, Brett Lee doesn't appear in the top, whatever it is, 100 test bowling average. So if you look at, you've also got to look at it from, well, what's the outcome as well? How many wickets has someone taken? What's their bowling average? So it's a little bit more than just saying build a perfect technique, because you don't get much from having a perfect technique. You don't get any extra runs or wickets from having a perfect technique, but you get runs or wickets from being effective, and whatever that looks like. And obviously there's the injury prevention aspect of it when it comes to bowling, but what it comes down to is, can you be effective? And often drills are working on, can you be perfect? And those two things aren't necessarily the same.
No, I agree with that. I mean, I used to love watching him bowl. I'll be brutally honest with you. Even when we competed against him, he used to. Yeah. It was poetry, wasn't it? Poetry in motion, a lot of it. But equally, as you say, he didn't have as many skills or effective skills as others have had. I mean, my old coach Malcolm Marshall his stats absolutely smoked Brett Lee out of the park, as did Curtly Ambrose, who I was with the other week. I mean, his stats at a similar time to Brett Lee were phenomenal. absolutely, off the charts. So, I know where Steph's coming from on that, because the stuff that Steph's doing, which is brilliant, as you quite rightly say, is more likely to develop a Brett Lee type of bowler than in terms of their action, and maybe a Malcolm Marshall. Not to say he couldn't do, but it's more likely to, which is much more organic, I suppose. And the same with Kirtley, being much more organic. A lot of thought gone into it, but from where they started to where they ended, there was probably going to be less adaptation than we see in modern day bowlers that go through systems such as Steph's. But ultimately, when Steph puts somebody out there who can deliver skills and achieve things at those stat level, then he's going to go to a different level, isn't he? Another level in the stratosphere of fast bowling coaches, and time will tell on that one. As with us all as coaches, really, only time will tell.
Okay, let's move on to the mailbag. A couple of questions that have been sent in by listeners to the show, and we're going to do our best to help solve the problems that these listeners are facing, or readers to the PitchVision website, of course, over at pitchvision.com. And then the best question of the week, as well as getting the question answered, also wins the prize of an online coaching course from PitchVision Academy at pitchvision.com. And the first person who has sent in a question this week is Talha. And Talha's got a pretty broad question, but so hopefully we can give a broad answer on it as well. And Talha says, I'm a bowler. Well, he says I'm a baller, actually, but maybe he's a baller as well as a bowler. But he's a bowler, but my bowling line is not correct. Please tell me a trick to correct this. When you get someone whose length is all over the place, where do we start? Or line, I should say. Line is all over the place. Where do we start?
Okay, well, when working with line, I guess there are a few things to consider, aren't there? One of the things I'd be thinking about, first of all, is when you say my line isn't correct, is it consistently in an area? So is it consistently leg side, consistently offside when we're talking about the width of it? Or is it just random, and sometimes it's a bit too wide, sometimes on the leg side, sometimes a bit too far on the offside, etc. So from that you'd get a bit of information as to what you're doing when you're actually bowling the ball. So if you were consistent, but you're consistently down the leg side or wide outside off stump, for instance, then at least it's telling you that what you're doing has an element of repeatability to it. So you're reproducing a similar line over and over again. So there's something you can work with, and there's maybe not the biggest change in the world to make there. Whereas if you've got inconsistency in that line and it's leg side, offside, etc., then maybe there is inconsistency in the action. So I'd be first of all trying to work out what the difference is between the two. So if you've got that consistency, you might find that just a bit of realignment, and you can redirect the ball in a slightly different position. So for instance, if you're consistently down the leg side, you may find that by realigning your run-up and being a bit straighter in your run-up, you might then reproduce the same delivery as you normally bowl, but it would then be further across towards the offside. Or similarly, vice versa, if you're wide outside of stump and you take your angle a little bit wider in your run-up. If you're inconsistent, then we're looking for the inconsistency. So what's your balance like? How is the alignment of your base? How is the alignment of your arms? Are your arms and legs moving repeatably if you look at one delivery to the next delivery to the next delivery, or actually is it all look a little bit different each time you're arriving? So try and look at the moving parts, try and look at where they're pointing, and just see if you can compare one ball to the next and see what's going on. But generally, if you can get arms, legs, etc. pointing in a straight line throughout the action, you've got a pretty good chance of the ball going straight. And similarly, if you can get that synchronisation right, and it's a little bit more tricky to understand, but if you can get your synchronisation right, so your arms and legs are working together. So if you look at yourself from side on in a video, you're getting to what we call a 5-point star, where your both feet are on the floor and both arms are extended prior to actually releasing the ball. Then you should be pretty balanced as well, or you find that your arms are going to be able to work whilst in a balanced position. So that'd be my starting point. Have a look at those things, and hopefully you'll either be able to put yourself into one category or the other, where you've got the inconsistency or you've got the consistency, you just haven't quite got the line.
one thing I was thinking about, Gareth, was the sort of type of focus that a bowler's got and the area that they're focusing on. Obviously, with batsmen, we talk about broad focus and narrow focus. I guess that applies to bowlers as well, and where they're focusing and how they're focusing can make a difference to where the ball lands.
Yeah, definitely, and it's about targeting, isn't it? And you've got some people that are narrow focused, that they would love to bowl at targets, for example, and I've worked with bowlers and watched others work with bowlers. If you put a cone down for them to hit, actually that cone's almost too big for them to focus at, so they pick out maybe the hole in the top of the cone as being their target point for them to bowl at. It doesn't mean to say they hit it every time. If they did, they'd be Glenn McGrath, but it certainly is a visual focus. It's really important that those guys pick out a narrow bit of a small piece of turf or a small area to aim at. And then equally, for other bowlers, having a broader focus. If they go too narrow and they get too intent on looking at a point on the pitch, it can affect the way that their bodies are operating, and they can get too tense across the shoulders, and then going back to that sequencing that Sam just talked about, that sequencing can be fractionally out, which leads you to push the ball or drag the ball here, there and everywhere. So working out which one of the two visual focus preferences works for you is really useful. So my suggestion would be to any bowler is have a go at both. So run up with a sort of broad picture. It's easier when you're bowling against a batter, a broad picture of what's going in front of you, and just sort of trust your feel to get the ball into a line and length and see how that goes for you. And then have a go for a separate over where you run in and bowl, looking at a very particular and specific point on the pitch, and see how that goes for you as well. And by the end of that little experiment, you will know, not just through your outcome, but also through how your body felt and how you felt as a bowler going through that process, which one of those two is going to be your preference. And it's a useful exercise which may add a little bit of value on top of all of the technical things that you can do in terms of alignment as well.
The other thing that came from a book that you recommended, actually, Gareth, The Inner Game of Tennis, is about trying not to overthink it too much, unless you're putting the ball into the side netting every single time, and then we've got a bit more of a challenge than if you're bowling the odd ball down the leg side. But if you can, you can do it. It's just at the moment it doesn't seem to be coming out right. Then it's almost sort of don't over focus on what your body's doing. Don't try and do it. Just let it do it itself. As it says in that book, let the serve itself. It's in tennis you're talking about serving. In cricket you're talking about you haven't got an implement, but you're still sending the ball somewhere. You want it to land in a specific place. So it's a similar process.
Very much so, and it goes back to that subconscious thought thing, doesn't it? That when we actually aren't worried about wides, and when we're not worried about our line, we just run up and bowl, and things happen for a reason, But equally, it's not as easy to do that when you are suffering a little bit of a radar problem, and we see people. We see people getting into a right state around that. So, having coping strategies for that, because it's going to happen to everybody at some point. Using your breathing really effectively, I think, is to try and calm yourself down is really useful. To have a bit of perspective that there isn't a bowler that's played cricket for any length of time that hasn't had this experience that you're going through, because you can often feel as if it's only happening to you. The fact is that it's happened to us all at some stage, is also useful to give us a bit of perspective. But yeah, breathing I think is really key, because it slows not just the body down, but also slows your mind down a little bit as well. Because our mind is an incredible thing for getting cluttered and becoming very very worrisome. So if we can control that, then it gives us a much better chance of being successful. That goes across all the disciplines, really.
Yeah, if you're stressing out, then you could, one of the common reactions to getting stressed about something is for your shoulders to tense up, right? And if your shoulders tense up, that's not going to help you bowling very much. So it's a great skill to be able to sort of release that tension and sort of accept that you're having that thought, but then don't do anything about it. Just bowl. Seems like too simple a piece of advice almost, but it's actually quite hard to do without quite a lot of practice. So,
Definitely. It's the same when somebody might be coming at you really hard, and you feel as a bowler that they've got your number. Whatever you bowl is going to go. It's that sort of situation again, and taking yourself out of that sort of taking a step back, getting your breathing underway, and just trying to relax in that situation, because it is really a good thing to do. It's not easily done, but we can practice it, because somebody in the next net session you go to is going to have a wool over you. If you bowl at 7 batters or 5 batters or whatever, somebody's going to be on top of you. So instead of just bowling and hoping that that 15 minutes ends and somebody else comes in, see if you can practice some coping strategies. You might have a net session where you are spraying it around all over the place. Well, that's a great opportunity to practice some breathing, taking yourself out of that situation, and trying to be less sort of critical of yourself, and see what happens then. If you recover it in that net session, then you can recover it when you go out to the middle next, and the same thing happens.
Next question's from Leon. It's another general question, but I think we can get stuck into it. Leon says, is success in 2020 a good measure for selection in 50-over cricket?
Well, it can be. It can be. Although it depends what context you're then going to be deployed in, I suppose. So if you're opening the batting in T20 cricket, and you have a great run of things, and you score loads of runs. So let's think about somebody like David Warner, for example. He's the best example of this. He went really well in T20 cricket, so his next stage was to play in some 50-over cricket, and all it really was a case of tempo. If he batted for 10 overs in a T20 game, he'd dominate it and set Australia on a good way. And equally, if he did the same in 10 overs in 50-over cricket, he could do the same as well. But what he's done brilliantly, I think, is he's adapted to be able to play the 35-40 over innings now. And we saw a few examples of that last year when Australia were in India, where at the outset of his career, I think he would have just kept going in that crash bang wallop type way that it came from 2020 cricket, but his experience and also the way he thinks about the game has allowed him to take the foot off the gas and just bat through that middle phase, still scoring at a good rate or not, because he's got enough shots and he's smart enough. But he started to score 140s, 150s and real match winning scores in 50 over cricket. So if somebody at the top of the order, I think it's really transferable. Somebody down the bottom of the order who's good at playing the 5 or 6 ball innings and striking at 210 or whatever the case may be, as long as you put them in the right place, I think, because trying to get them to extend their play over a 10 over period is quite a big stretch. So think about what you're trying to do with that guy in 2020. He's batting down the order and whacking at 200 over a very short innings. So if you can stick him in where he can do a similar thing over a slightly longer period, rather than asking him to completely change his game. That would be my sort of advice on that. And then you look at somebody like Bumrah from a bowling point of view. He made his name in 2020 cricket, but is now one of the best bowlers in 50 over cricket as well. And I think you've got to look at what they're doing and how they go, and what roles they're playing in those games, but also look at the character as well. Because I watched David Warner play and I heard him interviewed, and whilst everybody was talking about him being a 2020 player with potential to play 50 over cricket, I can remember sitting with Kevin Peterson at the time when we first saw this guy, and I said, I reckon he could play Test cricket, and Kev said, no, not a chance. I said, I promise you can, because he just does the basics really well. He just does them very early. So he hits through cricket balls fantastically well. And if you hit through cricket balls in Test cricket, you go pretty successfully. It's when you start to do the funky stuff in Test cricket that you maybe get found out a little bit. So, for me, David Warner wasn't just could he play 50 over cricket, but because of the simplicity of his game and the fact that he could hit through cricket balls, actually he could play whatever format that he wanted to put his mind to.
I think, Lavers, I don't know if you agree with this, but I think the word is adaptability, isn't it? Like there are changes between 2020 and 50 over cricket. There's fewer than between 2020 and longer formats. But if you're going from 50 over cricket to 20 over cricket, if you have that adaptability, that ability to adapt the way you play to adjust for a longer format, then you are going to be okay. And it's almost like that's the thing you have to be looking for, rather than, oh, well, he scored a 20-20 100, so, let's get him into the 50 over team. It's more like, well, he scored a 20-20 100, that's good. Can he adapt his game to be able to do it in 50 over cricket?
Yeah, I think having some skills is obviously going to be really important, but having that mindset to re-establish yourself in a slightly different format is so valuable, and a lot of people almost label themselves as a certain type of cricketer, and very, very dangerous to do that, or to label someone, because you can very quickly have a negative impact on their ability to transfer into a different format if they're trying to, and if they hear you saying that they're a certain type of cricketer, or if they tell themselves that. One of the things I was thinking about with this question is how the transition changes, and probably 20 over cricket into 50 over cricket is a very different transition in and outside of the professional game. Within the professional game, it's kind of working the same ball, similar intent. You'll bat all the way down to 8, 9, somewhere around there. People can get runs 8, 9, 10, hopefully. And it is a short form, whereas in non-professional cricket, 50 over cricket is the long form, and that doesn't have scores of 350 every week like it may do, or more often so, in professional cricket, and it's in different conditions as well. So the transition from 2020 to 50 over cricket in club cricket potentially is a bigger one than the transition from 20 to 50 over in professional cricket, in my opinion. And obviously there's the change of ball and the different 2020 competitions around the country. I think they generally use I think they're on a pink ball at the moment, is that right? But obviously then they go up to a red ball on a Saturday. Some of them then use a different coloured ball for part of the Saturday cricket as well, because they have 2 different competitions on a Saturday. So there are a number of kind of adjustments to be made, and they're slightly different between the level of cricket you play, but it does come back to what you said there, and it's that ability to adapt to a situation. And now whether that situation is a variation within a game or a variation of the format of that game, that is really what we're looking for, isn't it? It's that ability to adapt, reapply the skills you've got, or adjust the skills that you're trying to use in a particular game to suit the environment or the challenge that's presented in front of you. And every day that's different. Some days it's more different than others, and that's where those guys who are the best in the world pick up their game, put it in a 2020, put it in a test match. It doesn't seem to bother them. World-class players are world-class players.
Yeah, world-class adapters, as well as world-class many other things.
Adapters.
Yeah, as well as many other things. But yeah, that adaptability, I think, is crucial to it, and that's why you see guys who can do all three. But they're very, those type of players are quite rare, because it is hard to be that adaptable.
But it's very hard to be good at one of those formats, isn't it? And to commit all your time and all your life as a professional cricketer to being a great 4-day, 5-day player, or to be something or something else in 2020, it's extremely difficult to get to that level regardless, never mind to be able to kind of switch on, switch off and go from one to the other on a weekly or a daily basis. So don't underestimate the challenge that's involved there, and the skill that is applied by those guys who can do that and make it look relatively easy. Mind you, as you said, there aren't many of them, are there?
And that is the end of the show for another week. We do need to do one more thing before we leave, which is decide on the winner of this week's competition. The prize on offer is an online coaching course from PitchVision Academy at pitchvision.com. And the questions this week were Dalhurst's question about his bowling line, and Leon's question about 2020 into 50 over cricket. Which one did you prefer this week, Gareth?
I like Tyler's question about the bowling line, because you can come at that from so many different angles, and maybe one of those individual angles is the way forward for Tyler, or maybe it's a combination of a couple of them as well. So hopefully within that answer we've given you some things to experiment with and find the ones that work for you.
Yeah, good luck, Talha. And Garrows, if someone else who was listening to the show wanted to send in their question, we're always open for new questions. How can they get in touch with us?
They can give us a call on 0203 239 7543 or drop us an email on coach@pitchvision.com.
That is correct. You can also get in touch with us through social media. If you head over to pitchvision.com, you can find the PitchVision Academy account there. Just search for that. Send us a message there on our social media platform there. Or Facebook is facebook.com/PitchVision Academy. And Twitter is @PitchVisionAcad. You can listen to this show every week as well. If you want to do that, it's pretty easy. You just do a search for PitchVision Academy in your favourite podcast app. You'll find us in there. Or you can head over to pitchvision.com. Go to the Academy page. That's pitchvision.com/Academy, and click on the podcast link. And you'll find all the old shows, all the old show notes. You can download it, stream it from there, do anything you like along those lines. That's all for this week. We hope you listen next week. But until then, have a good week. Cheers, Gareth. Cheers, Lavers.
Cheers, fellas.
Cheers, guys.